Good morning. Apparently, Japanese adults are not having sex and the population is plummeting. Should I say this carefully? Well, it's a headline. It's a headline I had to tweet this morning. Actually, I refined it a bit. I tweaked it a bit. Tweaked it so that I could tweet it. My tweet was, the Japanese are too tired and too disinterested to have sex. Wow. As a journalist, as an editor, I can almost guarantee you that my Twitter is going to start lighting up here in a little bit with people who'll do what they often do to journalists, and that is they'll shoot the messenger. I'm not the one who came up with this idea. I simply reported it. Oftentimes, those of us who are in the world of journalism get slammed with simply reporting the news. Those of us who go out on a limb and maybe on the side of reporting something that's not really popular, ourselves are called to take a stand. We may be reporting something that's even investigative, that we thought we've done a really excellent job on. We've kind of taken a stand on reporting somebody or something or an idea where somebody has taken a controversial stand even. And the idea may be so unpopular for some people that there's derision and there's sarcasm and criticism. And so we call that term often shooting the messenger. So that's why we have to be extra careful that we're reporting the truth and that we get our ducks in a row, and that we use good reporting methods. Chapter 4 is full of information, which would have been the chapter that you were assigned to read for this week. Chapter 5 continues. I've noted a few things as we've gone along and as I've responded and read your homework assignments and your first article. I've noticed, for one, that there's a great tendency to maybe not understand what's meant by third-person objective. And just to get it out there all at one time, third-person objective means that you don't write in first person. Even though you're using your powers of observation, you don't say me and my and our. You write third-person objectively. He said, she said. Basically, you don't even say says. You just say said. Just to get it out there clearly. You let your powers of observation of what is said and how it's said and the details of the situation to move your story along, not your own personal observation. And you limit your adjectives in a news story. Good magazine writing has a lot more description. And yes, you should have some description in good news writing even, but your description is more in the details, the kind of details that you choose to put in a story, even in a news or a feature story. I have at the top of my notes here, bathed in prayer. And I think the reason for that is whenever you enter into a story that you know might be somewhat controversial, that oftentimes you're going to be looking at it and perhaps thinking, wow, should I really say that? I mean, that person said that, but should that be part of the story? If your only hesitation is that it might upset somebody or make somebody mad, you might have to really consider if it's going to harm somebody or cause somebody some angst. And if you're really thinking through that situation, you might need to know at this point that one thing that I always do is, especially when it's going to be controversial or a big story, is to bathe my stories in prayer. Consider the person or persons that story might affect, and to actually pray about it. to pray what is it that I need to put in that story to be truthful and to get the information out, but also to make sure that I'm okay with it as far as prayer-wise, what needs to be part of that story. I was thinking of that especially in relation to all of the Cosby stories. It's very interesting, and some of you have responded to some of those stories. It's very hard to know in a situation like the Cosby situation exactly how to approach that kind of reporting. I know when I started seeing them come up on our website, and I started editing those stories and finding pictures to put with them so that the same picture wasn't used again and again. Even the picture tells part of the story, and so whether it was a picture of Cosby laughing and making this whole thing seem like a joke on the part of the women, or whether it was a part of Cosby being very sad, that's going to kind of tell the story from our point of view on whether we think it's just kind of a silly situation or we think it's a very serious situation, these allegations by these women. Part of your responsibility as a reporter is going to be to use words like alleged. Things that are being brought up at this point are very hard to, quote, prove. They're he said, she said kind of accounts. And so as this is being sorted out, as it's being played out, as people are, well, proving with timestamps and with airplane tickets and so forth that this could have happened, or it couldn't have happened, or it could have happened when it was alleged to have happened. Those are the kinds of things that will come out in all of this. But what will have happened meanwhile is this man's credibility will be called into question, and these women's credibility will be called into question as well. So be aware of that when you're reporting, to remember to use the proper terms, and if you don't know what they are, look them back up in the AP Style Guide or ask. In your discussion of your articles, I wanted to mention that you need to start looking away from the 5 W's in every time you review a story, and look for other ways, 5 other ways that good characteristics of news writing are being used in the articles that you're choosing. And you don't always have to choose hard news stories. You could choose other news stories that are in other news sources. And I would say look for a variety of sources, because more than, oh, I looked for this story because this is the kind of story that attracts me. You might look for a story that, yes, it caught your eye, obviously, you wouldn't choose it, but look to review the story itself. Look for what works in the story and what doesn't work in the story, and kind of try to evaluate it from that point of view, like you would be a food critic and you were asked to go check out a few restaurants in town. Would you just pick your favorite restaurants, or would you pick other restaurants where you didn't even know, but you chose that restaurant because you wanted to see what the food was like? So maybe try a few new things and look at some articles that some journals that you may not be familiar with, some well-known journals, and you know, look at the New York Times, look at the Chicago Tribune, look at some other newspapers that are out there, the LA Times, for instance, some other online publications, or that you can easily get your hands around, and let me know what's in them, and definitely put that URL in there so I can also look at the article and see what you're seeing, and give me some feedback on those, and your classmates some feedback on what you're seeing around the nation in those journals. Another thing to do is look at some of those locally produced things, like I know in Missouri, when I taught there, we had the Platte County, the Landmark, and the Citizen. They were rival newspapers in a small town, and yet they had a huge journalistic responsibility of reporting what was going on in people's lives. And it was so interesting for students to see how those two little rival small town newspapers compared with one that was just right up the road, the St. Joseph Gazette, I think, and how those papers compared with each other, and they compared with the Kansas City Star, which was the large paper in that area. And to be able to see the difference in not only the kind of the writing style, but the content of those papers, how the stories were more in line with what the local readers wanted, but then also how they brought the national news closer to where it reached and touched on the lives of those people. So be cognizant of those local papers, especially if you live in a big city. Maybe try to find, when I say, when we say a local paper, try to find something that may be not in the, if you live in Riverside per se, don't get, the LA Times and consider that your local paper, although I would consider it your local paper, but get something a little bit smaller and regional even, and kind of look at how the difference is in the reporting and kind of vary it, mix it up a little bit. That would be helpful. Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about there. At this point, I wanted to say as well that for those of you who are, and I believe there's many of you in this class who are in public relations, I am hoping that you understand at this point how a good grasp of journalists and how journalists work is really going to help you in your understanding in public relations. How you're able to work for a corporation, a business, a ministry even, and to be able to promote that idea, that product, and to get it out there amongst the journalists. And you're going to already have a head start, number one, on the writing and the way a story is put together, but also on the thinking. What is going on in that journalist's mind when they look at that press release that you've given them, or they look at that story that you've given them, or just how they operate and how they think. And so when you take that, when you're a PR person, when you take that journalist out to lunch, or and probably that journalist will pay their own way, because if they're ethical, they're going to follow that rule, and they're going to insist that they pay for their own lunch, and they're not going to be influenced by you. But nonetheless, you're going to be networking and moving in circles with those type of people, because you're going to want them to promote your organization. And so it's so helpful to know how journalists work and just what they see as fair versus necessarily impartial. And I think that's very important to know. Up to this point, a lot of people were thinking that fair means you get a comment and you get a comment. And they think that objective means that, well, this somehow is a neutral person. But I hope what you're seeing, if you're reading Kovach, is that everybody has a bias. We all have a worldview that we come from. So we all pretty much have a bias. It's understanding that about ourselves and being able to reach past that and be able to say, hey, this may be my friend even, this may be my acquaintance, this may be my colleague, or an organization that I give money to or I'm affiliated with. But the truth of the matter is, if these things are going on with that organization, or even with that friend, or in this business that I know about, that it's my job as a reporter, it's my role, my function as a journalist to get down to what is it that's going on. Can I be objective? Can I be impartial in how I report this? I think that came up in some of your reviews this time. I pointed out in one that you may have a strong opinion about even the Charlie Hebdo case. There was, I believe, an ultra-Orthodox Jewish newspaper that had censored out, I mean, literally taken Photoshop and taken out some of the women out of the photo, or taken all the women, the 3 world leaders, out of the photo. Photoshop that thing, put some men in there. I mean, I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, as a photojournalist, I find that offensive because we talk about that in photojournalism. I mean, oh my goodness, you just don't do that. But on the other hand, this is a private newspaper. Okay, it's a private newspaper. It's a religious publication. It's an ultra-Orthodox publication. Now, could they have reported that event by not using the photo? Absolutely. Why they chose to use a photo and doctor it? They doctored a photo. But again, it's an ultra-Orthodox private publication. Who are we to say? Who are the pundits to say? Who are the journalists out there to say that they did anything wrong? Well, whether we say anything wrong or not, CNN decided to report on it. But when they reported on it, my point in pointing out to one of your classmates was that whether we feel like that's wrong or not, CNN's leading into it with really what ended up being a really one-sided report, because what they pointed out was that this wasn't the first time the publication had done it. They really didn't quote anybody from the publication at all. And they really didn't get into how, I think they said that it was for religious reasons that they did it, but they didn't quote anybody from the publication. And it was just such a quick report that I just kind of thought, okay, so what? It's a religious publication. They kind of can do what they want, but there really wasn't anybody weighing in with an alternative. There was a similar report out of, I think it was Miami, and that kind of got my interest because I was like, oh, I used to live in Florida. And it was about using mugshots that had been taken by the police department for target practice or something. And the story went on and it talked about how one of the women, I'm not sure why she was on the shooting range, but she identified one of those as her brother. I think she was a county worker. And she was really offended, and first it was alleged to be racism, and then it turned out it wasn't, because some of those were also mugs of Anglos as well, and Hispanic young men, not only African American young men. Or I guess men in general. I'm not sure if they were young, old, or whatever. They had just been, I guess, mugshots. And it was, but the way the article started out was, oh, can you imagine if that was your brother at the other end of a gun or something used for target practice? And it wasn't in reporting what happened. It was how it was reported and the emotion that's elicited. Every reporter, here's how I want to let you know, you are so valuable. What you do is so important. You have the power to influence how a person is going to take that information in. Look at that power. Now, that person took us in and got us, angry almost right away, or at least emotionally attached to that story by saying, imagine if this was your brother on the face of this target. Wow. Of course, all of us are offended. I wouldn't want my brother on the face of a target. Okay? But think about that. What if it was the sheriff saying something like, coming to his own defense and saying something like, the Miami sheriff, imagine if the story led with him saying something about him not knowing, or Miami County sheriff, I'm not sure the example I used, but there are a number of ways that story could have been reported out as hard news from the sheriff's perspective of maybe being low on budget, and those were the only ones they can get up their hands on, and they were run off of the copy machine. Just a whole other number of ways that kind of thing can be handled. And that's where you have the power as the reporter. You're the one that takes whatever information you want and you put it in the lead on a story that's not a hard news lead. So that is powerful stuff. So when you're objective, you look for a way to make sure that not only is it written objectively, but that you are objective and you're not working for an agenda. That's really important. Or just be transparent enough to say, I do have an agenda. I am transparent enough to say, by virtue of what our news service is called, we are the Christian Examiner. Do you think we have an agenda? I think we have an agenda. We make no bones about it. We are a conservative, evangelical, focused Christian newspaper. So the points of view that are expressed pretty much in our paper are an evangelical, conservative Christian point of view. Now, does that mean that other views are not expressed? No, but we advocate for an evangelical Christian point of view. Now, we use great journalistic methods. We use objective reporting. We use a third-person objective writing. This is for the one news service that I write for. But it's very transparent in that way. People know that when they come to our website. They shouldn't expect anything else on our website. I mean, that's what they should expect. So often it's what you say you are and then how you fulfill that as a journalist. If you're ABC, CBS, NBC, even CNN or Fox, although those are cable news networks and they tend to go, CNN tends to go one way and Fox tends to go another way. I think they both still say that they are fair and impartial. But it's important that you note that everybody comes with a bias, and it's how we present that information that's going to help us within ourselves understand whether we're willing to still be objective and truthful in our reporting, understanding our own bias towards certain things. So that's really important to know. Now, on chapter 4 this week, I was just really happy to see that you had a lot of good information in your Harrower text, what I call the fun one, the one that has all these wonderful articles that you can read through. And you really kind of have to read through them as if they're just nice, short little articles there for you that are focused on the various things that you're doing. And it is important that you read through them like that. It's not created like a whole lot of other textbooks. But I wanted to point out on page 74, and if you have your textbook with you, go ahead and look at page 74. I know I'm like almost 23 minutes. So if you want to take a break and then come back and click me back on, this is good, because page 74 is on observation. I noticed one thing that will help you. I said earlier, don't use first person in your news articles. News articles are not to be written in first person. You save that for when you're the expert and you're offering an expert opinion on something, or you're writing an essay about yourself. That's a first person type of a piece. That's an opinion, or an opinion type of a piece, an editorial type of a piece, okay? But for a news article, you're writing in third person objective. One of the things you're doing is you're drawing on your powers of observation. I hinted at that a little bit ago. Page 74 has a great article on observation. It's how you use that power of observation to show and not tell. And the more you think about how to show, the less you'll want to say me. Because you're trying to show people something, not tell them. Don't tell them what it was like. Because when you tell people, then you're letting them know how you felt. When you show people something, you're telling them, let me let you in on this. I was so happy at the national championship. Oh my gosh, I couldn't have been happier. Ohio deserved all of the respect. Did Ohio win? I think Ohio won, yes. Ohio deserved it. I mean, my gosh, they've worked so hard all year long, and they've had so much to deal with. I mean, Ohio they're just, they're just on top of their game. I mean, it was just wonderful. It was the best game I've ever been to. And the emotion was so high, and we were so filled with joy, and I just couldn't help myself. I mean, I ate a hot dog, I had French fries, and I just am so overjoyed with what happened, and I'm so glad Ohio won. Well, I am too. Not really. Yes, really. Actually, I like both teams because I've read about and written about both, which is kind of how I like it in sports, especially because it's so competitive. And I like having players all over the place because then I can say, well, I'm rooting for everybody, which is a good thing with sports, because sports writing tends to get very biased, which we'll talk about in a minute. But listen to did you understand anything about the game? Did I give one detail about the game except that Ohio won the national championship? Did I show you, or did I tell you? I told you, but I really only told you the outcome, and I told you how I felt. Okay, problem. Now, if I showed you, I guess I could have showed you how I felt by, I don't know, I said I was overjoyed, so I'm showing you how. But see, that's what happens when you tell. If you show, then you're going to give details. Ohio State won by, I don't know the score, maybe 21-6. No, that's terrible. Okay, I don't know the score, but I would show you the score. I would show you what it was like. In the third quarter, Ohio State came from behind with blah, 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 blah. The Ohio State team took to the field with 29 players and 14 of them having struggled through the year. Number 32 went for a touchdown. I would have the details of the game. That's showing you. That's showing you. I would say, Coach, gosh, what's his name? He's the coach that came from Florida, isn't he? Okay, I would say, Coach so-and-so led the team with fortitude. He told them in the fourth quarter, quote, you must blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the game, he threw his arms up, declaring victory over Oregon. We can do it. We did it. We can do it again. Yay. The leading quarterback who helps with disabled children sat down on the field and cried and said, oh, I can't believe we pulled through. This was the most wonderful minute of my life. Okay, now you're showing. You're showing. Did it say anything about you? It didn't. It didn't, and it's not supposed to. You are just the reporter. It doesn't say a thing about you. It's not how you felt. It's not how they had a joyous victory. You felt that. The reader feels that when you report, when you show, the reader feels it. They know what it's like. When you show the Indians, the Native Americans on the reservation who are standing together in a close circle and they're crying because their leader just died, and they're chanting and they're mourning the death. You feel the emotion after Terry Schiavo passes away, actually is starved to death and dehydrated in the hospice, and there's a press conference and you're there and you're showing, you're reporting what's happening, you're quoting from people. They get the story. Your readers get it. They feel it. That's what you want. You want to show. You want to show what it's like, whether it's in Ferguson, whether it's at Disney, where some little kid got the measles or something because their other kids weren't vaccinated. Wow. I mean, you want to be right there in the midst of the Dumbo ride. I mean, you want to start out with the Dumbo ride. I would be starting out with the Dumbo ride, where they were forced to sit next to some other kid because there wasn't enough room, and they put them all together, and that's probably where they got measles from that unvaccinated child. Anyway, I mean, that's a little extreme, but I'm just saying, you want to show. Show, 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 show. That's how you get to be creative. See, you just show. Use the details on hand and you show. Not in these long descriptions. You don't need a description. You just keep the story moving along by using comments and quotes and putting the story in context. You show. And look at stories that work. Read stories that work and notice those details. A good example is the best teacher. Look at the stories that sing, that work, and watch how they move along. Watch how there's no more than 1 to 3 sentences in a good story that works, and it moves along. And the quotes are at the top. They're not buried somewhere in the middle. And it just keeps working. It just keeps going. It flows. That story flows. And it's a solid news story. There's plenty of them in the back of your book, but there's also plenty of them online. Okay? Look at the action on page 75. So many news stories are dull because nothing happens. So you've got to bring those statistics out. Talking about sports again. Bring those statistics out in a decisive 75 to 32 victory over the Raging Hornets or whoever. You can tell I'm not a great sports writer. Actually, I'm a pretty good sports writer, and I'm going to tell you why. I cover sports from a little different angle than most people. And most of the news services that I've written for cover sports from a different angle. We cover sports from an inspirational angle. What is it about these athletes that, the athletes that we interview, that is a little bit different or that's unique? And we cover sports from an inspirational point of view. I've covered 4 Super Bowls. And, well, no, 3 Super Bowls and a Pro Bowl in Florida. And most wonderful thing. I just had an interview recently with Anthony Madison, who played in the 2009 Super Bowl in Tampa. He played for the Steelers. What was very interesting was, let me tell you a little bit about that interview. And I'm going to have to tell you quickly because this video has gone on too long. But I wanted to tell you that to kind of wrap it up and give you an idea of a really good sports story that's not about the game, but it's definitely sports related. The 2009 Super Bowl in Tampa was my second Super Bowl, and I think I gave you a link to probably the first one that I covered, and an intern that I took had written up a little piece about that. Well, the second Super Bowl that I covered was in Tampa, and it was the Steelers, and I'm not tracking now, the Steelers and another team. It was the Cardinals. I'm pretty sure it was the Cardinals and the Steelers, yes. And I know that because in my mind, I'm picturing Kurt Warner. I have some great pictures of Kurt Warner out there on the field. Here we fast forward to Media Day. It's Tuesday. Every year, Media Day is on Tuesday, and that's where we have a free-for-all, basically, with each team. We have each team on the field for about, I think it's almost an hour before the big game on Saturday. So on Tuesday, we go out there to the field, and we either show up and we park with our NFL credentials, and we have access to one team first, and then the other. They let us know which one. And the major players are in booths, and the other special teams players and the ones that are not as well known, they just kind of wander around. And you've got about 200 media people at least that are credentialed to be in there interviewing these Super Bowl players, and coaches. And it's an awesome time, but it's confusing. If you do not know sports and you don't know these numbers and names of people and what you want to ask them ahead of time, it can be very daunting. But I'm not intimidated by people. So I usually have my research done, have my list. I have literally a list of numbers to go down. And I've kind of tried to look at their faces ahead of time, but yeah, that doesn't work real well. So I look at their numbers on their jerseys and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's this guy, and that's this guy, and I'm going to try to interview this guy. So I kind of walk around for a while, and on this particular day, I didn't have a photographer tasked to me, so I was trying to do both. I was trying to interview these guys and to get pictures of these guys. So I'm walking around and I'm like, okay. I'd interviewed some of the major players and gotten in on some of the kind of, when they're in a booth and they're a major player, you don't necessarily have time for a one-on-one interview, but you can ask a few questions while they're in this big booth and get some really good pictures because they're in one place. Okay, so I'm walking around and I spot this one guy. It's Anthony Madison. He's with the Steelers, and I've heard that he's got a pretty good story to tell about his personal commitment, his life, his faith, and his commitment to Christ. And so I walk on over to him. He's standing in the bleachers, and I said, Anthony, I said, I heard that you've got some interesting times to tell me about. And he goes, well, y'all, something like that. And I just kind of laughed and I said, well, I'm with Baptist Press. And he goes, really? He says, well, I am ready to talk to you. And he literally grabs me around the shoulder, which is kind of funny because he's actually a little bit shorter than me. I think he's about 5'8" or 5'9". He's not that tall. So he grabs me around the shoulders and he says, well, sister, he said, you just sit down right here with me and we are gonna talk. And so we sit down right in the bleachers there. And I whip my notepad out. Well, I already had it out, I'm sure. But I turned my tape recorder on and we had the best, probably, 15-minute interview. I mean, they were packing up by the time we were finished and I was needing to move on. But, I mean, we were just visiting. We were just having a good time. He told me about his twin sisters who actually share the same birthday as me. I don't know how we figured that out. But we had a wonderful talk. And I just asked him some really same questions pretty much that I asked other guys, but he really wanted to go a little bit deeper. And he kept asking me questions about myself. And so I told him a little bit about myself and what I did and my family. And he really wanted to know about my family. So I told him a little bit about my family. And he was just like, well, Miss Joni, well, Miss Joni, well, Miss Joni. And so he told me that, he really wanted to think about some things because his goal was to win the Lombardi Trophy, the Super Bowl trophy, and to have a ring on his finger, but that he really didn't know too much about what was next. He kind of looked at me perplexed when I said, okay, well, what's next? And he said, well, I really hadn't thought much about it. So fast forward. Actually, the parting shot was, are you on Facebook, Miss Joni? And I said, absolutely. And he said, okay, look me up. Make sure you find me. Make sure you find me. And listen for me. And watch for me. I'm going to tackle somebody today. Well, sure enough, he did. He made a great tackle. And I was listening for Anthony Madison. And he made a great tackle. Well, he retired in 2010. And I kept up with him on Facebook. Well, I had the opportunity this year. Somebody said, we need some athletes for this outreach guide that we're going to do in Arizona since the Super Bowl's there. Joni, do you have any ideas? I said, well, my friend Anthony Madison just put something on Facebook about how winning the Lombardi Trophy was not what he thought it would be, and that he had to really think about his next step in life. And he had some really revealing decisions after that. And I said, why don't I contact him? So I did. I interviewed him. It ended up he's on the front page of an evangelistic piece that's going out to, I think, about 250,000 people in the next few weeks and during the Super Bowl next week. And do you know that when I interviewed him for that piece, here's what he said to me on the record: Miss Joni, out of all the noise that week, your question really made me think. It really made me think about what was next in my life. So just remember, as a journalist, you also have a chance to really listen and be part of something bigger. And how are you going to do that? So I'm signing off for now. We've been on for a long time. You have a great week. You have a great week next week as we go into our midterm. Many blessings.